Hello, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm just tying up last year's cuttings. This is actually a jasmine. I use masking tape, by the way, to tie up some of my cuttings, some of my plants, particularly these tall climbing plants. But anyway, that's not why I'm here today. The reason why I'm shooting this video is because one or two people have asked me to shoot some video about the new plant nursery that we're working on at the moment. Basically, these were cuttings that I took last year, in June last year, and as you can see, 1 year on, they're actually produced some beautiful plants. And this is really easy to do. It's not difficult. Anybody can take cuttings. Anybody can actually start their own back garden plant nursery. It's really not tough. If it had been, no way we would have taken it on. But what I'm going to do today is I'm going to show you a few things. I'm just going to put that to one side for a moment. What I'm actually going to show you first of all is how we take cuttings and how I have been taking cuttings for the last 2 years, which has given us a certain amount of stock for the new venture. I'm going to show you how we actually do the sort of mechanics of taking a cutting. Now, I'm sure you've seen plenty of videos online of people doing exactly the same thing. I don't think we're going to be doing anything that different here, but what I did want to do is to show you well, a little bit more about how you take them. I would like to show you a little bit about some of the plants that we raised last year, just so you can see what can happen within a period of just 1 year in terms of preparing these cuttings. And I'm also going to show you my sand bench, which is where I raise all my cuttings. So first of all, I'm going to start with these variegated Weigelia cuttings. When you, as I say, 12 months on, this was about a year. I took this cutting a year ago. Of a variegated Weigelia. It was taken in about June of last year. Managed to keep it alive during the winter, putting it inside the poly, but as you can see, it's produced a good sized plant now, and that's literally, as I say, 12 months on. So within another 12 months this will have produced, the plant will be up somewhere, probably up about here, and that will be ready for selling. So how do we do this? Well, there are two mediums that I use. One which is general builder's sharp sand, and I also use my own compost mix. Sometimes I merge the two together, it really just depends. The vast majority of my Weigelia cuttings and most of my herbaceous cuttings are taken in sharp sand. I've had some success with both. It really depends on the type of cutting. Most of these small sort of, as I said before, herbaceous style cuttings will root just fine in the sharp sand. If you think about it, they're not actually looking for any kind of feed at this stage or any kind of nutrients. All they want to do is to form some roots. So really, you could plant them in virtually anything and they would still form roots. It's about what you do with them after that when they start to grow away. But again, I've kept my cuttings in the past in that sharp sand for anything up to a year, and they've still managed to survive and grow on quite happily. They won't grow very much, but they will remain happy. They won't die off. They'll be just fine in that. So, I don't know, James, do you want to get in a bit tighter on this? I'm not sure how much of this you can see. But basically, I'll just come a little bit closer to the camera. This is a standard Weigelia cutting, which I've just taken off here, which I've literally just cut using my secateurs from the parent plant. Not this parent plant, I might add. I'm not going to take any cuttings from that yet. I've got plenty of stock plants which I can take cuttings which are much bigger than this. So this was just taken about literally 5 minutes ago. Secret to these cuttings, don't take them too in advance of when you need to put them in, because they'll start to expire straight away. They'll start to lose water straight away through the leaves. The minute that you take that away from the parent plant, it's going to struggle to survive. And the way you're going to keep that alive is by using what we call mist, which I'll go on to in a moment. But for now, usual story, as you can see, I hope you can see from the video, we've got some green growth here, which is this year's growth, and then we've got some of the hardwood growth here, which is last year's. I could take it up here, which will be up just underneath that green growth there, but I'm not going to. I'm going to come down one pair of leaves to something which is sort of semi-hardwood, which is not soft and it's not hard, it's sort of something in between. So I'm just going to cut it off just below. Snip that off nice and clean. Just strip those leaves off, usual stuff, and just get rid of those. And that's a perfect Weigelia cutting, and I can tell you that will root. Now, just one extra thing that I do, I just take a knife, got this little pocket knife that I carry everywhere. Just scrape a little bit of that bottom off, basically just damage it a little bit. if you damage it a little bit, what the plant thinks it needs to do is to actually create some roots, throw out some roots to repair it. So that does help. So it's worth, just as I say, just take a little penknife, any sharp object, just scrape it off. Okay, let's do another one. So again, there's the green growth. It turns a little bit browner as it comes down here. I could come down here, looking at the size of that cutting. I'm not actually going to go that far. That's sort of semi-hardwood here. Snip that off, strip it off, and that's ready to go. Just take the knife, just damage it a little bit there. Okay, so I'm not going to go and prepare loads of these because otherwise you'll just get bored watching me do that. Next thing you do is just grab a pot. I like to use clay pots. I find clay pots stay warmer. They absorb the heat. The only snag with them is that they do tend to dry out. So make sure you get one big enough. Just got some more over here. Get one that's big enough so it doesn't dry out too quickly. But as we're going to be using a spray system, we should be able to keep them nice and moist. So into there, in goes the sharp sand. Don't fill it right up, leave a little bit on the top. Leave a little bit of space, almost about half an inch or something. Now, should you use rooting powder or not? I always do. It's just a bit of a guarantee. It helps it to root. You don't have to use it, but I tend to. I just like to use whatever I can to improve my success. Take it, just dip it in the bottom there, cover it in the rooting compound, dib a hole in the corner, and just push that in nice and firmly in. It's important that you firm them in, that you don't leave any air around the bottom of the hole. Actually, I'm just going to take those extra leaves off. It's important that you don't leave any air pockets in the bottom of the hole. Just dib them in they go, and that's that. But it's as simple as that, and then I'll go and water those, and I'll show you that in a moment when we go over to the sandbox, and they'll grow away quite happily in there, and they'll root probably within about 4 to 6 weeks, using what's called a misting system, which again I'll just explain a little bit more about in a moment. So I've also got on here some roses. I wanted to show you these. These were last year's cuttings, which I took again about the same time in June. Just snip some of those old heads off there. This also I took last June. As you can see, it's grown into a gorgeous plant. It had some lovely flowers on it earlier in the year. Probably about 4 or 5 weeks ago we had some gorgeous big blooms on this, which have subsequently faded and gone, but I'm sure it'll bloom again. But as you can see from a cutting, which I'm going to show you in a moment, within a year you've got almost a full grown rose. There's another one here which has grown a little bit more. They'll need staking, in the same way I've got a little bamboo cane in here. In much the same way as I did with the Wigelia, I'll use the masking tape, about a 4-inch piece of masking tape. Just tear that off, pull that in, and I'll just tape that to the bamboo cane. You don't have to tape it hard, just stick it at the back, make sure the paper sticks at the back. Okay, so they were last year's. Now this morning I've been out collecting some more from the nursery, which I'll show you in a moment or two, but this is how they started life. These are a bunch of, I got them in a bucket of cold water, by the way, just to stop them drying out. Rose cuttings, there's a bit of a mystery around whether they, how easy it is or how difficult it is. They're really simple to do, rose cuttings, in much the same way as we've done with the Wigelia cuttings. It's simply just cutting it just below a leaf node like so. Just snip that off and then literally tear the other lower leaves off. Now it's entirely up to you, but I like to take out that growing tip as well, because I don't want it growing upwards. I want it creating some roots. So what's that? That's about a 10 or 12 inch cutting. I'm actually going to come a little bit higher, take about an inch off that. So I'll end up with a cutting which is about 10 inches. And then again, I'll get my knife wherever I put it. Anyway, I don't know where that's gone. So I'm just going to use the blade of my secateurs again, just to scrape one side of that cutting off. I'll get in a little bit closer again. Hopefully you can see that. You can see that's what they call the cambium layer. You're trying to expose that white layer underneath the green bark. And again, that will attempt to push out roots from that point. So there it is. I'll just snip off a couple more leaves because they'll probably die off anyway. And that's just about a perfect rose cutting. Get another one, slightly different variety this time. Let's grab a different one. Okay. No, where are they? Sorry, bear with me a moment. Here we go. Here you can see where they've been snipped off the original rose bush just here. The reason why I've done that is because I want to keep this small section here, which is where the branch meets the stem, because that's going to push out plenty of roots. So I'm just going to literally cut that straight off there, take some of that off, take these lower leaves off, like so, as I did before. Just take that top out and take a couple more leaves off. And there you are, that's a perfect cutting, that's going to work just fine. So as before, just scrape off that lower outside edge. One side's enough. And there we've got another cutting. So again, rather than keep you waiting, I'm just going to go straight ahead and plant these. Now, they're slightly different. I treat the rose cuttings slightly different than I do from the standard herbaceous plants, sorry, standard shrubs, because I found that trying to root these in sand, they don't root quite so well. I find I had a lot more success last year trying to root these in a mixture of sand and compost, which is what I'm going to do now. You could put them in a pot of this same size as this Weigelia, but quite honestly you need something a bit bigger and a bit deeper. So I'll just go and grab something a little bit more, a bit bigger. So this is nice and deep, as you can see. It's quite a, it's probably what, it's about a 6, 7, 8 inch pot, which is nice and deep, not too big, because otherwise it would take too much material, too much compost. As you can see, I want to get that in the ground about 4 inches, so I need all that depth. So now I'm just going to mix a bit of this compost and a bit of this sand together, about 50-50. Again, it doesn't have to be an exact, not an exact science. And then again, fill it within about 1 inch of the top. And hopefully you can see there, that's quite a sort of coarse mix, so it's never going to get waterlogged. Water's going to go straight through that and out the bottom. But the I don't know, for whatever reason, I think it must just be purely because it's roses, but putting that extra bit of compost in keeps them alive. They seem to need a little bit more in the compost when they come to root. So again, as before, just dip it well into the hormone rooting powder. Dib a hole about 4 inches. That's in about 4 inches. There's about probably 6 inches of the cutting is actually sitting out the top of the compost. And again, dip that one in, firm them in, keep them firm, stop that air around the roots, as we said before, the air pockets forming around the roots, and that's it. I'm going to put a bit more medium in there. As you can see, there's nothing fancy about this. There's nothing I'm doing that's there's no kind of mystery or magic about this. It is that simple. The things you need to bear in mind, as I said before, is one, use a bit of hormone rooting powder because it will help them to root. If you're rooting roses, in this particular case, I use a combination of compost and sharp sand. But for my standard sort of shrubs like the Weigelias, other examples would be the jasmine that I showed you earlier. I will just use sharp sand and they'll root fine. So that's shown you a little bit of how I take the cuttings themselves. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to reconvene over at my my sharp sand box, cutting box, and I'll show you how I do this on a much larger scale.